For joining me in today's tutorial, I want to show you tips to building panel data in Stata. But why do you need to engage in panel data analysis? Some of the reasons could be that you want to explore the behavior of a variable across a sample of groups, and the groups in this case could be firms, companies, schools, countries, agro produce, cars, individuals, political parties. It could be anything. You may also want to explore the behavior of the groups in the sample with respect to a variable, or maybe the groups that you have assembled have some level of similarities among themselves, or the groups have varying heterogeneities or differences with respect to a variable, perhaps due to inadequate data over a long period for your sample, or maybe you just don't know why. In this example, I'll be using 141 countries from 2000 to 2012 across 7 regions, and my variable of interest is the Gini coefficient. In building your panel data, tip 1 will be generate identifiers. Watch my video on Reshape Wide to Long if you don't know how to do this. Tip number 2, reshape the data. Watch the same video for you to know how to do this. Tip number 3, classify the groups. By doing this, you are exploring the different features in the data. Tip 4, categorize the outcome variable to explore the basic features in that data. Tip 5, create dummy variables. You can create as many dummy variables as you like depending on your research. But in this tutorial, I'm only going to create 2 dummy variables, one for the regions and one for the years. Note, tips 1 to 3 will be done in Excel interface, while tips 4 and 5 will be covered in Stata. So if you are ready, load up your data, get your writing materials, and let's get started. This is my sample. I have countries from Albania to Zambia. And each country has 13 years observations from 2000 to 2012. For simplicity, I'm only going to be using 2 variables, Gini coefficient and trade. So from all you can see here, this is just a simple sample. If I load this into Stata, I won't be able to make any meaningful regression out of this. So I need to do something to this data. Tip 1, generate identifiers. Stata recognizes the groups by numbers, which are the identifiers. Without this, you cannot do any meaningful regression. So watch my video to do this. So having generated identifiers, this is what I have. Now each country has a number. Albania takes number 1 and Zambia takes number 141. You cannot do this manually, so watch my video because you can't afford to make mistakes. Watch that video so that you can allow Excel generate these numbers for you. Tip 2, reshape data. Stata recognizes longitudinal structure of your data. If your data is in the wide format, no regression can be performed. Watch my video again on how to do this. Tip 3, group classification. It is important to classify the groups that make up your sample so that you can explore the salient features among the groups. This is study specific. But for you to be able to do this, you have to resort to historic data of each group, and the imputation is done in Excel because that is where I always do my classifications. So since I'm working with countries, I'm using the United Nations regional classification and also United Nations income classification. So for instance, Albania is classified as being in Europe and Central Asia, and is also a country classified as being in the upper middle income class. So as you can see, each country is now classified on regional and income group basis. I did this so I can explore the different features in this sample. I can do a lot of descriptive analysis just by this classification. So always try to do some classification within your panel data. It brings out the beauty in your research. Tip 4, categorize the outcome variable. This is important for you to do so that you can explore the heterogeneities in your sample. You may also have to resort to historic data for the outcome variable and impute the information in Stata. Remember, tip 4 and tip 5 will be done in Stata. So now let's move over to Stata and see how we can categorize the Gini coefficient across the countries. So we are within Stata interface, my log file is on, and my variables are in place. So to begin analysis for panel data, you need to run this command, even though I've already done it, but let me still run it anyway. XTset CID year. These are the country's identifiers, and this is the year variable. So I click run. So with this result here, Stata is now prepared to execute every panel data code. So to categorize the Gini coefficients, my categorization will be along United Nations categorization, where countries are categorized along very low inequality, middle inequality, high inequality, and very high inequality. So I have 5 categorizations here. So this is the command. I'm recording the Gini coefficients and I'm generating a new categorical variable called Gini2. I highlight it and I click run. The command is executed. So let's see what happens in our data editor. So here in the data editor, we have a new variable Gini2, and we can see the categorizations here. Countries with 1 indicates they have very low inequality. Countries with 3 indicates medium inequality. You can see those with 4 have high inequality, and those with 5 very high inequality. So we have the categorizations here, but we are not done yet. So let me tap Gini2 and let's see how many observations fall within these categories. By executing the tab command, we can see here that across the 5 categories, these are the observations that fall within them. These are not the countries, these are just observations that fall within each of the categories that I have created. Still on categorization, I may decide to rename Gini2 to reflect its real name, Gini category. I execute that. You can now see here Gini2 is now known by its name, Gini category, differentiating it from the Gini coefficient that I've already renamed here. Now I need to now define these categories in a way that I can easily understand them. Remember, along the line of United Nations categorization, VLI means very low inequality, LI, low inequality, MI, medium inequality, HI, high inequality, VHI, very high inequality. And remember, the categories are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So once I see VLI across a country, I quickly know that that country is experiencing or has experienced very low inequality as at that point in time. So I'm going to highlight this and I execute. Highlight both together. These 2 commands I'm highlighting together. So let's see what happens in our data editor. So now, instead of having just figures 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I now have the specifics. These are the acronyms. So VLI indicating very low inequality. So if you scroll down, you can see now that at a glance, I can know the category of inequality that every country falls into at any point in time. So this will also make an interesting research if I'm writing my paper. So now let's tab Gini2 and let's see what we have. Instead of having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we now have specifically number of observations that fall within this category. This is what we have in the data editor. I need to move Gini2 away from here to a place before the year variable, just to sort of arrange my data. So this is the command I'm going to execute. I'm moving Gini2 before year. So here in the data editor, you can see that Gini2 is now before year. So now I want to rename Gini2 to be Gini category in the variable section. So I click here, run. So let's see what we have. So it's now Gini category instead of Gini2. Tip 5, create dummy variables. This is important to explore the heterogeneities in your sample. Dummy variables take discrete numbers from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 to n. You will also have to resort to historic data or background for the outcome variable and also impute this information in Stata. So back in Stata, to create dummy variables, I'll start with the regions. I'll be creating regional variables first. Remember, I have 7 regions, so this is the command I'm going to execute. So upon execution, this is the outcome. We have all the 7 regions, and we have the observations that fall into these regions. So these are the countries. If you divide it by 13, it will give you each country that falls into this region. And if you see here too, in our variable section, we have all the dummy variables. So you can see here, dummy variable 1 equals EAP and on till we get to SSA. So coming to our data editor, let's see here, we now have dummy variables for each of the regions. So for instance, our first country is Albania, so which is taking dummy variable 2. And from here, we know dummy variable 2 is ECA, because Albania is classified as being in Europe and Central Asia. Remember I said you have to resort to historic background for you to create dummy variable, if that is the case with your own data. I've also done better by renaming the dummy variables from dum1, dum7 to their respective regional names. So I've highlighted all these commands here. I'll click the execute button and let's see what happens in our data editor. Checking the data editor, now you can see that the headings have changed from dum1 to dum7 to their respective regional names. So at a glance, I can know which country falls into where. So the second dummy variable I'm going to create will be the year dummies. So here's the command, I've written it, I highlight, and I click run. So you can see the year dummies are generated for 13 years. And let's look at the data editor to see if there's any change. And you can see it like that. So every year takes 1, other corresponding years take 0 for that particular country. So I've just shown you the simple tips to building panel data. So using PowerPoint slides now, I've shown you where we are coming from. This is initial data. You can see here, it's so plain, no additions, nothing. Now we generated identifiers by which each country is identified by a number. And again, we have already modified the data from wide to long. So we have covered tip 1 and tip 2. Again, we included classifications for each of the countries, across regions and across income groups. So you can see that the panel is getting wider as we are including so many specifics to the sample. In tip 4, we categorize the outcome variable using United Nations categorization. So again, you can see the panel is getting wider. We went ahead to generate dummy variables with the regions. You can see here EAP, ECA up to SSA. Panel is getting wider. And lastly, I created time dummies or year dummies. So you can see from a very small panel, we can see we widened it with these beautiful specifications and dimensions that we have added. If you are able to do this in your panel data, honestly, by the time you are writing your papers, it will be so rich and interesting for anybody to get engaged in. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed this tutorial, let me have your feedback. Give me your thumbs up, support my channel by subscribing, and inform your friends and colleagues about Crunch Econometrics.